On today's installment of the John Campea Show podcast, we're off to a great start. Netflix has raised its prices again a lot sooner than people were expecting. Also, what are the reasons? Why did Ahsoka lose like 40% of its audience from its debut to its finale? On top of all that, the head of Pixar is blaming Disney for their Disney Plus streaming strategies for the slow start that Elemental had. Ridley Scott has seen the new Aliens Romulus, and he actually really likes it. And Kick-Ass director Matthew Vaughn wants to reboot Star Wars. What are the good reasons to do it and the reasons not to do it? That and a whole bunch more. The John Campea Show podcast starts right now. Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show podcast, coming from right here in our quaint little studio, brought to you in part by our friends at Mint Mobile. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, our international friends, gather around so we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news, TV and streaming, and all sorts of good stuff. Not just giving you our opinions, but giving you some information and context so you guys can form your own well-informed opinions, whether they're the same or completely different from ours. Ray Orr is not in studio today because he's off doing jury duty, which sounds like the premise of a new Judd Apatow comedy. Jonathan Voico's here, though.
I am here.
And Chris Carr is off doing a gig, so we were so lucky that Sean Chandler was available to come in and join us today. Sean, how you doing again, sir?
I'm doing great. Excited to be back on the show. It was sooner than I was expecting, but I'm totally game to talk movies and TV.
It's so good to have
much.
you back with us. And most importantly, you guys are here. Thank you so much for being here and making this show part of your day. Here's how today's show is going to go. We're going to start off by talking about those topics that I just listed off. And then in the last part of the show, we're going to take your live comments and questions. Now, if you're one of our beloved channel members, you guys know in the community tab, we already asked you guys a little bit earlier to send in some topics and questions. But if you guys are watching live right now and you'd like to get a topic or question on the show, you can use the super chat feature. And if your comment or question is appropriate for us to address on the show, we will get around to doing that in the last part of the show. All right. With that all down, let's get started with this, shall we? You know, streaming services raise their prices, and Netflix has just raised their prices again. Now, you guys might remember a week or two ago, we talked about a story that was first reported in Bloomberg, where they had caught wind and discovered that Netflix was planning on raising their prices again. But at the time, the report said that these price raises would probably happen sometime after the actor strike ends. And that could literally be months away. We don't know. Well, yesterday, Netflix shocked the world by saying, are you needing something exciting to happen today? How about we raise prices? So they did. This comes to us from CNN Business, who write the following. The streaming giant said in its third quarter earnings report that its premium ad-free plan in the United States will increase by $3 per month to $22.99 starting on Wednesday. Its one stream basic plan will rise to $11.99 in the United States. All other plans, including its entry-level $6.99 a month ad-supported tier, will remain at the same monthly cost. And there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that in a second. The company reported a 9% year-over-year increase in average paid memberships, adding 8.8 million subscribers in the last quarter. That's compared to 2.4 million in the third quarter last year. And we'll talk about why that is as well. Overall, Netflix reported 247 million paid global subscribers in the third quarter. And again, that comes to us from CNN Business. All right. Well, the first thing to touch on here is, why did they have so many new subscribers this past quarter as opposed to the quarter of the year before? Well, it's because of the exact same reason a lot of people thought people were going to abandon Netflix, which was they cracked down on password sharing, right? Remember, they announced that they were going to crack down on password sharing, and a whole bunch of people said, that's the end for Netflix. Everybody's good. Well, no, turned out it worked, and it worked very well for them.
Yeah.
So it increases a whole ton of new subscribers as a result. But now we get around to the price increase. So again, because of that Bloomberg report, we knew that a price increase at some point was going to come, but we thought that would still be months away. They decided to give us an early Christmas present. and come down the chimney and say F you. And they dropped a new higher price tag on us for everything. Now, it's interesting to note that one of the tiers that did not have its price increase was the ad-supported tier. And that is because what Netflix and pretty soon Disney and Hulu and all the other ones, they are starting the process now of trying to corral us into the ad-supported tier. Because what the streamers have learned, and we've talked about this before, is that they will actually make more money off me if I'm paying $6.99 a month and watching commercials than if I pay $20 a month and don't watch commercials. That's just what they've figured out. And so what they are starting now doing is raising the prices on the non-ad supported tier stuff. And they're going to keep raising those prices, by the way. They're going to keep raising those prices until they get it to the point where, okay, Campea, by paying us $35 a month or wherever it's going to end up, now is making as much money for us than if Campea was paying $7 a month and watching commercials. So, look, none of us are surprised. We knew this was coming. We knew this was the new strategy, but it still kind of shocks the eyeballs and the wallet a little bit, and maybe even the ass. When you look at the headlines.
What are you doing with your Netflix?
You look down at the headlines and you see once again the prices increase. Anyway, Sean, you heard the report. We see the prices are going up again. This is, this is a regular day now. We're finding out one of the major streaming services is increasing prices. They haven't raised the prices of the ad-supported tier. How do you take this news?
I feel like I have a total outsider take on Netflix pricing. Going to say something controversial and against my own personal best interest, but I feel like they should have raised. Yeah, I feel like they should have raised their prices a long time ago. It's like their starting strategy was to use the drug dealer model.
Yeah,
and you'll give one out for free, get people hooked, and then spend eternity raising prices. Even the way you're describing what they're doing with the ad-supported model sounds like the new version of that. Let's push everyone to this ad model that's only $7. You think that one's going to stay that much when everyone signs up for that? That one's going to go up eventually too. But it feels like they've created a scenario where their paying customers are perpetually feeling like they're charging more and they're getting less for what they're paying for, while at the same time, they deliver a ton of value, but they've just created this disconnect and frustration with their audience with the strategy that they chose. Like, I've been using Netflix for over 20 years now. I was with the DVD service for almost 10 years. When they first came out with the streaming service, I thought to myself, I would pay double for this. This is a better way to consume content. But they lowballed so early on that, do you remember this Quickster thing that happened 2011 when they first split the streaming and DVD? It was a nightmare. They had been giving away the streaming service for free. It was a free add-on for a DVD service. And as soon as they started charging for it, people went insane because they've chosen a strategy where they've gotten people hooked to a low price. So it is annoying. I'm paying the money myself. And it's like, really? Another rate? $3? This isn't even small. This is a big price hike. At the same time, I think they should have done some of this sooner.
And it's funny too, like I've been saying for a long time as well, like even though prices are going up, when you look at something like Netflix in a vacuum, you look at it on its own,
Exactly.
Even at the premium price of $22, and I don't have the top premium thing because I don't care about streaming 4K, but even at $22, when you look at everything you get on Netflix, it's getting less so, but even now it's still a bit of a value proposition. The problem, of course, becomes that Netflix is not the only streamer we need, right? If you're going to try to keep up with all the content, there's the HBOs, there's your Paramount Pluses, there's your Universal, there's Hulu, and there's Disney Plus, and it starts to add up pretty quick. But at what point are we going to get to that breaking point where even people like me look at it and say, this isn't a value proposition anymore? But that's where we're at right now. All right, guys, with that down, let's move on to this, shall we? A report came out in the last couple of days showing that the Ahsoka series dropped approximately 40% of its viewers from when the series debuted to when the series had its finale, and had about a 40% drop from the finale of Mandalorian season 3, which in and of itself was already a significant drop from previous seasons of The Mandalorian. Now, look, just full disclosure here. Most of you guys who watch the show on the regular basis know that I was actually really surprisingly excited for the show. I love the trailers. I really love Rosario Dawson, and I liked her iteration of Ahsoka very much. And full disclosure, I didn't like the show. I didn't think it was the worst thing I've ever seen, but I personally did not like the show. And I had some issues with it that I thought were going to probably affect a lot of other people. And apparently it did. This comes to us from Screen Rant, who writes the following. Samba TV delivered disappointing news through an infographic highlighting the Ahsoka finale's viewership numbers. The post reads, the finale of Ahsoka landed on Disney Plus last week to 863,000 U.S. households, not 863 U.S. households. This means that despite the Ahsoka premiere beating The Mandalorian Season 3's premiere, the spin-off show ended the season down 40% compared to the latter show third season finale. This was a major viewership loss for Ahsoka, which debuted on Disney Plus with 1.4 million households, representing a nearly 40% drop. So, as you sit back, now listen, let me be very clear about something as well. Even with that drop, there are some shows that would love to have 800,000 U.S. households watching them. It's by other TV standards, that's still a good amount of people were watching it, make no mistake about it. But the question becomes, if Ahsoka was able to debut right around the same numbers as Mandalorian Season 3, which was already low for the Mandalorian series, but still, why did its finale, why did it lose so many viewers over the course of it running? Now, somebody yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and telling them that I was going to kind of be discussing this today, and they sent me a video by a popular YouTuber by the name of Star Wars Theory. Now, Star Wars Theory and I don't agree on a lot when it comes to Star Wars, but I really like their breakdown of this quite a bit. I thought they were very even, balanced, and fair when approaching this. But watching that and reading the stories, it got me thinking about what led to that. What led to, so many people starting with watching the show and then abandoning it by the time it gets to its finale? I want to propose 3 different reasons why Ahsoka lost so many of its viewers from the beginning to the end. All right. Reason number 1, Star Wars, and this is more of a macro level thing, but Star Wars in and of itself is not in a super healthy place right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ahsoka, forget the prequels, forget the sequels. Ahsoka was coming on the heels of what I think most people would agree was a substandard series or season of Mandalorian, right? I think most of us love Mandalorian, but I think most of us would agree, to whatever degree, that Mandalorian season 3 was a step down from the quality of Mandalorian season 1 and season 2. Whether that means slightly less good than the first 2 seasons, or whether that means season 3 sucked. I think most of us agree that season 3 was not up to the standards of season 1 and 2. You add on top of that the fact that Star Wars in and of itself just hasn't been in a great place health-wise, quality-wise. They've had some great stuff. Ahsoka, Andor. They've had some terrible stuff. But just overall, the quality is not so great. So reason number 1, in no particular order, but the first reason I'll give for Ahsoka's losing thing is that Star Wars in and of itself is not in a really healthy place. Even the fandom is certainly not in a healthy place. You're safer to hang out in a toxic swamp than hang out in Star Wars fandom these days, but it's just not in a healthy place. Reason number 2, and this was a reason that I was worried about when they announced what this show was going to be. See, I, like some other people, got kind of excited when I realized it was basically going to be Rebels Season 5. Because I loved Rebels. I actually thought Rebels was quite good. Actually, I hated the Ahsoka character until Rebels. Rebels is actually the series that got me on board with the Ahsoka character. And so I was kind of excited about it. But I, and a lot of you guys, were a little bit worried that would being basically a continuation of Rebels alienate other people? Because let's face it, in the grand scheme of things, not an ass ton of people watched Rebels, right? We are a segment within a segment, those of us who watched and enjoyed Rebels, or Clone Wars for that matter, right? So would that alienate? And what I heard from many of you guys, and when I read in a lot of online discourse, was people watched Ahsoka because they saw her in Mandalorian, and then they abandoned it because they didn't know what the hell was going on. Right? They didn't know what was going on. So they tried, but unlike Mandalorian, where they launched it with all new characters nobody ever heard of and all that kind of stuff, they told the story from a fresh page and from a fresh perspective. Like nothing happened in Mandalorian where you had to feel like, I don't know what's going on. Like they made it clear. Whereas, when Sabine sees Ezra for the first time, my heart smiled. But anybody else who didn't watch Rebels is watching that, and they have who's the fuzzy-faced guy? Why do we care? All that kind of stuff. And
the show doesn't do the work.
Reliance on people already of watching it is the fact that there was an entire episode in the Ahsoka series, right? The one with Anakin where they did the flashback to Clone Wars. It was nothing but a complete fan service episode. It actually had nothing to do with the storyline of this season. And, a lot of people would fire back at me when I'd say that, and they go, no, John, you don't understand. It's about Ahsoka getting closure and getting peace about the guilt she felt. Okay, but that was a storyline from another show.
Yep.
That had nothing to do with this show. Imagine, if you will, if we're watching a Mandalorian season 4 and Luke comes back and then they take an entire episode of Luke finally going to Tashi Station to get some power converters.
Oh, he's had it coming for so long.
That's right. It was.
Well, yeah, now that you mention that sounds great.
Yeah, there's your next series, right? But had nothing to do with the story of what's happening in Mandalorian, but it was it was a fan service thing for people who watch Clone Wars. This was a continuation of that. But that just kind of highlighted how a lot of audiences felt alienated and had no idea why they were supposed to care. And they abandoned it before they got to the end. And the third reason I'm going to give is a purely subjective one, and many of you may not agree. It just wasn't a great show. Its dialogue was... it's dialogue. Yeah. Was in many places just cringy as hell. And there was just a number of big plot holes that I complained about a lot, and all that kind of stuff. Now, what it had going for it, though, what Ahsoka had really going for it was I think it was very effective for who Dave Filoni was targeting, which is that segment within a segment of people who watched and adored Clone Wars and Rebels. And I think if you were a hardcore fan of Clone Wars and Rebels, I think there was a lot in there that would make you smile and make you come out enjoying it and liking it. The problem is when you focus on a segment within a segment, you're not setting yourself up for success moving forward. Unlike Mandalorian, which brought in droves of new fans, Ahsoka was like, this is a members only club. And if you're not already in the club, there's no room for you here. So I don't know. Sean, you and I have never spoke about the Ahsoka series. I honestly don't even know if you ever watched it and if you did, what you thought of it. But when you see these numbers about how by the time they got to the finale, how it compared to the finale of Mandalorian, how it compared to the premiere of the season, what would you attribute that to? And maybe how do they course correct that as they move forward?
I'd say none of this is terribly surprising to me for a variety of reasons, many of which you just touched on. As for me, I liked the show more than you did. I thought it was good, certainly not great. And there were just a lot of unforced errors, just odd choices that alienated people. Like I went into it like excited because from the trailers, you could tell this aesthetically feels very classic Star Wars. Space wizards, lightsabers, galactic threat. And then, of course, the promise of Thrawn. There's a lot in here that's like, oh, this could be really cool. But as you said, it's designed for people that watched 5 seasons of Rebels, and 7 seasons of Clone Wars. There's so much homework that you have to do to understand the show, and the show itself doesn't do the work to bring people in. So the whole show is about finding Ezra and Thrawn, but it doesn't tell the audience why that's important.
Good point.
It doesn't tell us why is Thrawn a threat. There's 6 canon books about Thrawn. Not even talking about the one in the 90s. Just in the current continuity, there's 6 books about his relationship with Anakin, his relationship with Darth Vader, his people, and his actual plan. None of that is in any way communicated in this show. We're just supposed to know things, why he's a threat, what he's up to. And he makes these looks and he says, oh, it's Anakin's pupil? And we're supposed to know why he knows any of this. It doesn't do any of the work itself. The other thing, just anecdotally speaking, The Mandalorian was a really special show for my family because it was the first time that both me and my son were excited for a new show that was coming out. So for the first 2 seasons, we woke up 6 a.m. Texas time, watched the episodes before my son went to go to school. That was really special. He had that helmet on your desk. He's got one of those. He wore it to church on a Sunday. Like, he's just obsessed with The Mandalorian and all this stuff. This is his on-ramp for Star Wars. And my middle child wanted to name our youngest child Ahsoka Tano when she was born. So there was like all these reasons we were really excited for the start of the show. Started with 4 family members watching it. By the end of the first episode, my son is checked out. He wasn't interested. By the end of the 3rd episode, my daughter, that wanted to name her sister Ahsoka Tano, said, this show is boring. They made Ahsoka boring. And then by the end of the season, my wife didn't watch the finale. So it was, in my household, we had 75% drop off. I thought it was good.
Anyway, what would you say though? Because look, right now, Dave Filoni has got, forget all the other stuff that might happen on Disney Plus. Dave Filoni they've announced this Mandoverse Star Wars movie. What do you think are some of the course corrections maybe, or what would be, say, one key course correction they need to make as they're approaching this, announced movie that they're going to do?
I think they need to get back to designing Star Wars for this.
Right.
That's what made Star Wars, the original trilogy, and really all of the Skywalker saga is designed for this. Some of them alienated for different reasons, whether you had issues with the prequels or Last Jedi, but they're designed to be these movies that are billion-dollar spectacle films, broad-reaching, epic storytelling. And even in what we're going to talk about later on about rebooting Star Wars, one of the statements that Matthew Vaughn made in the interview leading to all of that, he said they need to get back to making epic stories again that are designed as on-ramps and not dividing the audience, not designing it for segments, but what are actual on-ramps that everyone can enjoy. And that's what The Mandalorian was. As I said, it was literally the first time my son went, oh, that looks cool. I want to check that out. And it finally brought the Star Wars fandom together for a couple of seasons for a little bit there.
Yeah. But
then it started splintering again. And as much as I love Andor, I think it's fantastic. But it's also something that it's a different genre. It's not really space fantasy. And so even that, it doesn't bring the audience together. And they need to find that way that unites them with broad storytelling that's an on-ramp for everyone, but also pays things off.
All right, guys. With that down, let's move on to this, shall we? The Pixar film Elemental, when it opened in theaters, had an abysmal opening weekend, like a terrible opening weekend, which was a shame because the movie is actually quite excellent. It's a wonderful film, not a top 2 or 3 or 4 best Pixar film of all time, but I mean, it's a really excellent little film. The good news for them is that word of that got around and the movie just had legs and legs and legs and actually ended up turning in a pretty decent box office return. Still, it started off really damn slow. And we've talked on this show a lot about why that is. Well, now the chief head guy over at Pixar, Peter Docter, has come out and is basically suggesting that one of the reasons that Elemental had such a slow start is he's pointing out his bosses. Disney's been dumping our movies on Disney Plus. This comes to us from the folks over at Cartoon Brew who write the following. When Elemental hit theaters in June, it did so as one of the biggest flops, at least for its opening weekend, as one of the biggest flops in the studio's history. Without putting all the blame on Pixar's parent company and distributor, Disney's doctor says, that's the name of the guy, he's not literally a doctor. Disney doctor says that a streaming-focused release plan in the early days of Disney Plus has done long-term damage to the theatrical prospects of films released by the company. In a recent New York Times piece, he argued that Disney, in the hopes of growing subscriber numbers, was too eager to send films directly to streaming. 3 consecutive Pixar films bypassed the theaters and went straight to Disney Plus. Soul, Luca, and the amazing, should have won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, Turning Red. And that again comes to us from Cartoon Brew. And you know, this is something that we have actually talked about around here, that when Disney got into the habit of taking Pixar films and dumping them on Disney Plus, you guys remember there were a lot of stories and reports going around about how ticked off people at Pixar were about this. I mean, we heard about a lot of the rank and file at Pixar. We didn't hear a lot about the executives, but it sounds like maybe even the head honcho over there was kind of tiffed and perturbed. There he is. That's a doctor right there. And, you know, what we've said on this show is that by dumping 3 pretty decent quality, especially Turning Red, movies onto Disney Plus, what Disney did was they removed the feeling that a Pixar film was an event anymore. They changed the narrative of what a Pixar film is. A Pixar film is just another cartoon you sit at home and watch. It's no longer an event. It's no longer an occasion. It's no longer a theatrical experience. Now, that wouldn't have happened with just 1, but then they doubled down on it with 2, and then they did it a 3rd time. And then really, unfortunately, when they did come back into theaters, they came back with Lightyear, which was not the best foot forward to come out with on that level. But still, you know, it's kind of interesting, and this is nothing new, but it's really interesting to me, Sean, sitting here now and hearing actually the chief guy at Pixar kind of pointing this out, that this has been a problem. What do you think about his comments here? And do you think that the way Elemental kind of turned its box office future around, can Pixar get back on track? How do you see it?
Yeah, it feels like Pixar is just saying what all of us were able to say on the internet over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, totally understand what you're doing in December of 2020. Maybe I understand it with Luca, summer 2021. But then when you moved into 2022 with Turning Red, it was like you're just training audiences not to go to the theater. And that hurts. And I took my wife and 2 daughters to go see it at a press screening. So I didn't even have to buy movie tickets, but just buying popcorn and drinks for my wife, daughters, and I, it's still $50 or whatever. And we didn't have to buy tickets. So it would be over $100. And you trained people, we're just going to drop it there anyway. We're not even thinking about taking the whole family out. But I mean, I think the legs of the film show there's still demand for Pixar films. We love that experience. So like I just said, my family to go see it. The short ended, just the 5-minute short. My wife wasn't crazy about going out because I had to get a babysitter, all of that. The short ended and she goes, it was worth it just to see that short. That was so good. And she loved it. And then we watched the movie. We get out and my 5-year-old goes, I want to be Ember for Halloween. I go, Karis, if I set you on fire for Halloween, I go to jail. We can't do that. But the conversation in my car was, this is the Pixar that I love. That was the conversation leaving. Like, it captured that energy that you think a Pixar movie, family entertainment, and it's just something new, a rom-com from Pixar. They did it. And that was the narrative that spread from people that actually saw the movie rather than the opening weekend that was a bad headlines for a few days.
All right,
I
guys.
think you can't turn around.
With that down, we still got to talk about Ridley Scott has now watched the new Alien film that Fede Alvarez has produced, and he really loved it. Also, Matthew Vaughn, director of, well, I think the most underrated movie of all time, Stardust, Kick-Ass, an X-Men film. He actually wants to reboot Star Wars. What are the pros and cons of that? But before we get to that stuff, we're going to take a quick second and thank a couple of sponsors of today's episode of the John Campea Show podcast, our friends at Rocket Money and Quip. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money. Did you know that the average person has around 12 paid subscriptions and they might not even remember to subscribing to half of those? If you have no idea just how much you're spending each month, you need Rocket Money. It's this great app that tracks all of your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going. I recently just found out that over 80% of people have subscriptions that they've completely forgotten about. Seriously, think about how many free trials you subscribe to that you just probably never canceled. And that's why I'm such a big fan of Rocket Money, because I was one of those people. When I signed up to Rocket Money, I was stunned to find out that a gym I had belonged to in another city I lived in, I had still been paying my dues to for over 2 years. Also, that music subscription service I use, I forgot I was subscribed to 2 other ones. That's where Rocket Money comes in, because Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. With over 3 million users and counting, Rocket Money customers have saved on average of $720 a year. So stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/Campea. That's rocketmoney.com/Campea. rocketmoney.com/Campea. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Quip. Guys, good health starts with good habits, and Quip makes taking care of your oral health easy by delivering all the oral care essentials that you need to care for your mouth. They've got an incredible electric toothbrush with timed sonic vibrations with 30-second pulses to guide a dentist-recommended 2-minute clean. Guys, it's my favorite toothbrush I've ever owned. And who likes flossing? I don't, but this water flosser hits all the right spots with gentle or deep cleaning pressure at the touch of a button. But guys, then there was an additional surprise. Quip also supplies mints and gums that are fantastic. Every time you pop one of their new mints, you'll be caring for your mouth inside and out. Bold mint flavor keeps your breath confidently fresh, and you'll get a boost of vitamin D. And their gum prevents cavities and freshens breath when chewed for like 20 minutes after eating. It's sugar-free, is tooth-friendly, and has 0 calories. So guys, if you go to getquip.com/Campea right now, you'll get 20% off any electric toothbrush, mint and gum dispenser, and water flosser. That's your 20% off any electric toothbrush, mint and gum dispenser, water floss at getquip.com/Campea, spelled GETQUIP.com/Campea. Quip, the good habits company. And thank you to our friends at Rocket Money and Quip for sponsoring this episode of the John Campea Show podcast. All right, guys, with that down, let's get on to this, shall we? Iconic Hall of Fame director Ridley Scott has seen Fede Alvarez's new Aliens film, Aliens Romulus. Still an odd title. People are going to think it's a crossover with Star Trek. Anyway, and apparently he loves it. Now, that is not as small as you might think, because if you guys remember, Ridley Scott apparently was not all that thrilled with Blade Runner 2049, which I thought was fantastic, like miles better than the original, in my opinion. But some people agree, some people disagree. But I think most of us agree it was fantastic. And then just recently, he talked about Top Gun Maverick, which of course his brother directed the original. And this was Ridley Scott's one-word review of Top Gun Maverick. Meh. That was his one-word review of Top Gun Maverick. So Ridley Scott is not an easy audience to please.
Yet he liked Prometheus.
And yet he thought Prometheus was great. So there you go. So Fede Alvarez is, of course, directing the new one. And he finished his film, and he decided he needed to face the music and show it to Ridley Scott. This comes us from the AV Club, who wrote the following. Even if he didn't ask for it, says Fede Alvarez, I was going to go there and sit at a table and look at him and get it, Alvarez said. Even if he was going to say, you destroyed my legacy, I wanted to be in front of him and see him in the eye. I didn't want to get an email where it says, Ridley says. All this belly aching was for naught because Scott walked into the room and said, Fede, what can I say? It's fucking great. So apparently he loved it. He liked it a lot, which is kind of huge because look, they've already started this thing, fair or unfair, Aliens and Predator are hard to separate, right? Like when we think of Aliens, because of the way things have gone, we'll also think about Predator. We kind of equate the two in many ways. When something happens to one, we wonder what's going to happen to another. And look, for a couple of years, both of these franchises have not been functioning at peak performance, right? I think it's fair to say that. Well, then a little bit ago, Hulu, of all places, comes out with this Predator movie called Prey. And holy crap, it was great. Like I firmly believe to this day, it's the best Predator movie outside of the original Arnold Schwarzenegger one. I thought it was really a special film. I enjoyed it a hell of a lot. So as soon as that movie came out, a lot of people started asking and wondering, could they kind of do the same thing with Alien? Like, can they resurrect, no pun intended, can they resurrect Aliens too with this approach? And it looks like they're trying. Anyway, you know, Sean, just because Ridley Scott says he likes it, that doesn't mean all of us are going to like it, but it's clearly a hurdle that they got over. Can Aliens kind of go through an image rehab like the Predator did with Prey? Could that be the next one? What are your hopes going into this new one?
Honestly, I'm loving everything I'm hearing about this project. I feel like some of these, both the Aliens and Terminator franchises were ruined by James Cameron. Now, don't get me wrong. Aliens and Terminator 2 are two of my top 5 favorite movies of all time, but he made these awesome slam bang sequels that were just these incredible spectacles that both of those franchises have been chasing that spectacle.
Yeah.
And losing what originally made the franchises special in the first place. Enter Fede Alvarez, who's made a couple of, I would say, great close quarter, tense horror thrillers to do Alien. And I think, yes, how do you bring in a fresh new energy? He doesn't have the same aesthetic as Ridley Scott at all. But I think he's the right kind of person that can bring something fresh and get back to the vibe of the original Alien. Also, as you just said, I love this idea that Hulu is taking these franchises that had, like, for me, top 10 favorite movie of all time level movies back in the 80s and getting back to smaller budget. We don't need to make it a blockbuster and turn it into a 21st century spectacle film. We're about delivering that original experience, get a director that gets that. I feel Fede Alvarez is the right person. So I loved it when he was cast or hired. And then when you have Ridley Scott saying, I saw it, and he's a cranky old man, like you said. He doesn't have any reason to pander. This is like the same reason him, Scorsese, these guys in their 80s, they just say exactly what they're thinking. And if he thinks it's great, and I was already excited, man, I can't wait. If they can do the Prey treatment to Alien, I'm so excited.
You know, something you brought up there too is because when you look at Alien and Aliens, right? Two of the most celebrated genre films ever, but those two films are like completely different, right? Because you got the first one is a very intimate movie. It's a very small number of characters. It's an isolated number of locations. It's very much kind of a horror film. And then you get into Aliens, which becomes one of the greatest action films, more big, bombastic. What they did with Prey was they took the Predator story and then they made it way more intimate again. Small number of characters really just focusing on this girl, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if, like you were kind of suggesting, can Fede bring it back to that sort of origins of Alien? Will he be doing that? Will he be making a more intimate kind of story, or will he go, you know, wider in scale? So I guess we're going to have to wait and find out for that. All right. With that down, guys, let's move on to this, shall we? You know, Matthew Vaughn is one of these directors that whenever he gets his name attached to something, I kind of get excited about it. Even though he's put out a couple of films in recent years that I did not love, like the second Kingsman movie. I'll straight up tell you, I thought it was terrible. Like the first one, unbelievably fantastic. I thought the second one was terrible. And then The King's Man that he just did with the best actor in the world who has never won an Academy Award, Ralph Fiennes, was also pretty bad. I thought that one was pretty bad. But, you know, when you look at whether it's the original Kingsman or one of my all-time favorites, Stardust, and others, when his name gets brought up, it's something to be excited about. Anyway, he was doing an interview, and this kind of came up where the idea of doing a Star Wars movie came up, and he said something kind of interesting. This comes to us from Den of Geek, who wrote the following. Matthew Vaughn would like to reimagine Star Wars. If I, says Vaughn, was allowed to reboot Star Wars and go back, put Luke Skywalker and Vader in it, and to start again, Vaughn says, everyone would think I'm crazy, but I've been arguing we've all done it with Spider-Man pretty well. Bond, I think Star Wars is the Skywalker family. So if I was allowed to do the Skywalker story, then I'd love to do Star Wars. So Matthew Vaughn, who, by the way, we found out a couple of years ago, has gotten kind of close a couple of times to maybe directing a Star Wars film here and there. But to hear him say that he would like to reboot, go back to the beginning. Hey, we've done it with Spider-Man. Well, we've done it with Spider-Man several times. We've done it with James Bond. Why not? Let's go back, start from page one with this kid on a moisture farm on Tatooine standing up looking at the binary suns. You know, let's just go right back and do it. And if you guys know me, I have no problem with reboots. Like, to me, if you do a reboot and it sucks, oh well, there's a bad movie. It doesn't affect the original in any way, shape, or form. And if you make a good reboot, yay, we've got another good movie we can celebrate, right? So what would be some of the pros and cons of doing a Star Wars reboot? Well, let's start with the pros. Number one, I mean, the way you could do the original Star Wars today, as opposed to when George did it with the limitations that he had, that George talks a lot about all the time, about the limitations he had at the time. There certainly is something in terms of technology that you could do something probably really spectacular with it. Number two, it gives us the opportunity to go back and relive that story again. Maybe from a different perspective, because I always believe if you're going to reboot something, the directors need to bring their own unique slant to it. Same basic story, but bring your own thing to it. So it would be a little bit different, but still, it would give us a reason to go back and just revisit that awe, revisit that wonder. If you ever can recapture that wonder of, first of all, the Corellian Corvette coming over first, and then that Star Destroyer and flying over the top of the camera, and it just keeps going and going and going and going, spoofed so well in Mel Brooks' Spaceballs. I mean, if they can find a way to recapture all of that and take us back there again, introduce us to a new Leia, there's something really special about that, if done right. If done right. The third positive thing about something like if Matthew Vaughn was able to go back is you get to, in one swoop, get rid a lot of the, let's say, less desirable Star Wars content that we've had in recent years. Ditch the prequels, ditch the sequels, even though I actually really loved one of the sequel movies, but ditch the prequels, ditch the sequels, all that kind of stuff, and you get a chance to start from your first building block and build it all out again. Keep what worked great, change what didn't work so well, all that kind of stuff. A lot of advantages there. So I can see it. I can see where Matthew's coming from, and the idea, if you're a director, that I would love to go back and just tell the story of Luke Skywalker. Of course you would. Who wouldn't? However, I think there's some arguments against it as well. The first thing is this. I disagree with Matthew Vaughn that Star Wars is inseparably just the story of the Skywalkers.
Yep.
I think the inherent genius of the Star Wars universe that George Lucas created. Remember that one movie where they said the true genius of the Constitution is the fact that they made it so it could be changed? I think the true genius of the Star Wars universe that George Lucas created was that it wasn't just about one family. It was this incredible universe This incredible world with its own geopolitical backgrounds and stories and multiple characters. Like, it was literally limitless. And I think personally that where Star Wars is right now, it's imperative that they move outward and explore this incredible playground that George Lucas created. So yeah, the story of Luke Skywalker happened, the story of Anakin Skywalker's turn to Vader, that all happened. That's a part of the history of this universe, but there's so much more to the universe to go and do. That, and once you reboot, there's no going back to the original. Not that you can't go and watch the original Star Wars. I mean, once you reboot the universe, you can no longer build films in the existing universe that we have. And so I don't agree with Matthew Vaughn that rebooting Star Wars is the way to go. I think expanding and moving out and even away from some of the mistakes they made is the way to go. But I can totally see why folks like Matthew Vaughn and maybe others would see the appeal in it, because I think there are some pros to it. Sean, you're a big Star Wars fan yourself. I'm sure this is a conversation that you and all of us who are Star Wars fans have had many times about when is the time to reboot Star Wars, all that kind of stuff. Hearing a director like Matthew Vaughn saying that he would like to reboot Star Wars, what to you would be some of the reasons to reboot it and maybe some of the reasons not to reboot it? How do you see it?
Yes, Star Wars is approaching 50 years old.
Yeah.
So the original target audience are now the grandparents of the current emerging target audience. And when you put it that way, you're like, wow, that's incredible that we have a continuity that is this long. But that means you have a lot of problems that come along with that. That the audience is fragmented, it's segmented, and one group of people are like, I loved Andor, and another group of people are like, this isn't Star Wars, where are the laser swords? One group of people love Ahsoka, and the other group of people are like, what on earth is going on here? And so I can see appeal in that. Also, like with Star Wars, George Lucas has been mythologizing himself for a long time to present it as he always had this big master plan. I grew up with the THX, the last tapes of it before the special editions, and they had these Leonard Maltin interviews where George Lucas is like, the original trilogy, yeah, it was one script and I had to break it up. History has made it clear that's not true. I don't know if you've ever read the J.W. Rinsler books on the creation of the movies. He literally breaks down the scripts and how many things have changed. Like, if this was actually all his original plan, why did he set up a love triangle between a brother and a sister? Producer Alan Ladd has made it clear in some interviews before he passed about what the original plan was for Return of the Jedi. There's a lot of broken pieces in the continuity that are so pivotal that weren't fully set up. There's a lot of reasons to, like, if you tell it in order with all the great pieces of all of this, I see the appeal. I see where he's coming from. But Star Wars isn't just the Skywalkers. It is this great continuity. It is modern day mythology in space. It's all these different things. The starting point, the first frame we see a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. There's so many stories to tell there. It's this huge universe. And I think one of the strangest ones about kind of even the suggestion, one of the biggest criticisms of Disney Star Wars is that they keep going back to the same characters, the same exact timeline.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The same context. Like, we keep going back between the start of the Clone Wars and the start of A New Hope. We keep going back. So how do we resolve all of this? Let's go back and tell the same story at the same point in the timeline with the same characters. And I go, it's just the most extreme version of my biggest frustration of what they've been doing for the last 10 years. So I get the appeal. You can fix some problems. It might clean the slate so you can make it appealing again. But I also feel maybe this James Mangold biblical epic where we go 25,000 years in the past, maybe that's a way to get back to the broad epic storytelling.
That's why that's what I'm most excited about.
Exactly. And so that's what I think that what you need to do. Stop like just playing in such a tight sandbox and explore this galaxy, tell new characters. Mandalorian, as we've discussed already, that was one of the unifying things because they could do something fresh and new in this world that's populated by these characters that we love.
All right, guys, the question is for you. What do you see as some of the pros and cons of the concept of the unthinkable, rebooting Star Wars. What would be the operating motivation behind keeping it as it is or rebooting it or whatever? What direction do you think they should go, and how would you handle it? I'd be curious to know your guys' thoughts. All right. Hey guys, with that down, we're going to move over and start taking your questions and topics that you guys have been sending in to us. But before we get to that, we're going to take another quick second and thank a couple of more sponsors of today's episode of the John Campea Show podcast, our friends at Fume and my mobile service provider, and they should be yours, Mint Mobile. We want to take a second to thank a sponsor of this video, Fume. Quitting cold turkey is great in theory, but you and I both know it's way more difficult than that. And that's why there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some fake online promises. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume. And they look at the problem in a different way. Instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavor-aired device that does just that. See, instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. I personally didn't know what to expect when I first got my Fume. I mean, I've never liked vapes, but my goodness, the taste. The first time I tried it, I was completely sold on it. It was incredible. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use the code Campea to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use the code Campea to save an additional 10% off your order today. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Mint Mobile. Signing your life away to a big wireless provider is kind of like being trapped on a roller coaster from hell. Sure, it looks like fun at first. They probably even threw in a free phone, but now you can't get off. Month after month of insane bills and unexpected thrills, like overages and surprise fees. If that sounds like your current big wireless plan, it's time to get off the ride with Mint Mobile. For a limited time, wireless plans from Mint Mobile are just $15 a month. That's unlimited talk, text, and data for just $15 a month. You guys know before I came to Mint Mobile, I was paying triple what I am paying now on the standard big wireless plan, and I will never go back. All plans come with unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. To get your new unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped right to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea. And thank you to our friends at Fume and Mint Mobile for sponsoring this episode. All right, guys, with that down, let's get over to your questions and topics, shall we? We're going to start off with those of you who are watching live and sending in those super chats. So, Jonathan, what do we got up first?
First up, we got Raymond. If Star Wars is rebooted, should it start at episode 1?
No, screw that. I mean, if you reboot it, you do exactly. I mean, again, I don't like the idea of rebooting, but if you are, I side with Matthew Vaughn. You start with Luke Skywalker. I mean, that's where you start. I don't know, Sean, personally, I think one of the benefits of rebooting is you don't have to do the prequels. I don't know. Where do you think they should start if they did reboot?
I guess I'll take the other side on that one. If we're going to reboot it, let's tell the story from a different perspective so that it's designed to be told in this order rather than retconning prequels and trying to make them fit. So I would say start with episode 1 so you can tell that story right. You tell the fall of the Republic properly without having to retcon things. And so it fixes many of those mistakes. And a lot of the biggest issues with the prequels also are George Lucas being bad with dialogue and no one telling him no.
All right, what's next?
Okay, Raymond has a two-parter. Taylor Swift as Rey will put them on the map. If Tay-Tay is in Star Wars, there should be a tour.
Well, here's of course the problem. Tay-Tay has been in a couple of movies of late, and ain't nobody went to go see them. Cats and Amsterdam. And just having Tay-Tay in there did not bring people out. And by the way, Tay-Tay's not an actress. I don't even know why I'm saying Tay-Tay.
It's fun.
I don't know. I don't think anybody anywhere should assume that if you put Taylor Swift in your movie, that movie will instantly become a success because history has proved that's not the case. All right, what's next?
Matt Boyle says, I was wondering what your thoughts on streaming services doing the yearly payment. In my personal opinion, I like pay once a year. Sometimes you save money doing that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can see the advantage of it if you say like, okay, we're charging, just for argument's sake, we're charging you $10 a month. So if you pay monthly, you're going to pay $120 in the year. But if you pay for a full year up front, we'll charge you $90. Oh, you're actually saving $30 by doing it. There's some rationale there. And I'm personally the type of person that I like to pay for everything up front. Like ever since I was like 19 years old, my personal philosophy on finances is never borrow money, never go into debt. If I can't afford to buy something with cash, that means I can't afford it. So even with something like subscription services, I kind of like that approach of saying, you know what, pay for it in advance, because if I pay for it in advance, then what's in my bank account? I know that's what's in my bank account. I don't have to worry about a little bit trickling out every month. I've already paid for it. You know what I mean? But that does remove from you the flexibility if after 4 months you decide, you know what, there's nothing on the streamer I want to watch anymore. Turn it off. So there are pros and there are cons.
I guess it could also save you from if Netflix does a couple of rate hikes in a year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing, which they have done. That's actually a really good point, that it would kind of protect you if they did a price increase, at least for the balance of that 1 year.
We'd hate to have to raise the rates on you. Maybe you should pay for the year.
It'd be a shame if your prices went up. All right, what's next?
Mike Jones with a $50 super chat.
Oh my God, Mike!
I was like, "There's silence,
so much, man." Thank you, dude. That's incredibly generous of you. Thank you for that support.
Hey, John, I just saw the trailer to the new movie Ferrari with Adam Driver, and OMG, this has Oscar buzz all over it. Adam Driver definitely should get a nomination for Best Actor. I was wondering, did you see it?
Okay, first off, let's pump the brakes on. He should definitely get a nomination for Best Actor. Why? Because I saw him on screen for 90 seconds. So let's pump the brakes on that talk. But listen, Driver is an incredible actor. And this Ferrari trailer was insanely good. The sound of it, the editing of it. Again, we're just talking about the trailer, just a trailer, but it was a superior marketing tool. It was really, and the way they all started it off, like, I don't know, Sean, if you saw this trailer or not, but they started off with Adam Driver saying, no two objects can occupy the same space at the same time. And that kind of becomes the theme of it. And you get a sense of his obsession and his madness and his passion. It was a great trailer. Did you have a chance to see it? Because I think it just dropped like in the last 24 hours. Did you see it, Sean?
No, I foolishly watched the trailer for anyone but you, but didn't watch the Ferrari trailer.
Dude, I remember they showed us the preview for that at CinemaCon back in April. And because everybody loves Powell. I mean, coming off of Top Gun Maverick, Glenn Powell is a huge thing, right? So you think, oh, a new rom-com with Glenn Powell. And it's like, what is this garbage? I don't know, maybe the movie will be great, but the trailer certainly didn't look good.
Glenn Powell went to the same high school as me, so I like to call him my close personal friend that I've never met. So excited for anything that he's in, and then watch that trailer, and it's like, what are you even selling here? What is it? What is this premise? What is going on? But I've heard great things about his other movie, Hitman, so can't wait to check that one out.
All right, what's next?
Okay, we got Nerd of the Rings. Is this the actual Nerd of the Rings? Like
send you like a $20 support. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Either way, thank you. But if it is Nerd of the Rings, I also like your channel. With Warner Brothers Films and Amazon TV both making Middle-earth adaptations going forward, will this breed competition, forcing each to elevate their film series? Or is this just a fool's hope? Yeah, sorry, I was cut off there.
I gotta tell you, I am fascinated at this whole situation. Like, I'm fascinated when you drive by a car accident on the highway. Like, what's going on? This does not sound like a good scenario. Like, I get it. Lord of the Rings rights issues are a jarbled mess. They are. And there's certain things that could go to one company, certain things go to the other. But I do not think this is poised anybody for success. Look, for years, I said the television show, and I've said this for years, that I am most looking forward to than any in my life is this Lord of the Rings series coming to Amazon. And let's just say it didn't live up to my expectations, right? Didn't live up to my hopes. I'm still curious to see where they go. I always go back to Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. I hated the first movie, but man, I love the second one. Like they learned something after the first one. And I keep having that hope for things that I don't like the first season. So I didn't like the first season of it. I still have hopes for the second one. But with Warner Brothers still in the mix here, Sean, I don't think this is a healthy situation. I think one company needs to have the rights. I think it's going to cause confusion. I don't know. What do you think about this whole scenario?
Yeah, it's a mess, and it feels like corporations just thinking about money, not thinking about the money comes from creating a great product that an audience can connect with. I thought the Lord of the Rings show felt like they gave a ton of money to mediocre scripts, which is what streaming services do a little bit too much money for mediocre writing. And just this adds one more layer of like, what are you guys doing? How is this good for the audience? You guys win. You make money when the audience wins. When you make a great product that is consistent with a brand, a story, and there's excitement there. And that's not at all what this feels like. The way they're talking about it doesn't have that flavor to it. It's not about storytelling. It's not about art. It's about maximizing IP value.
And by the way, I don't know for sure if it is, but if that actually is like the administrator of the Nerds of the Rings channel, also big fan of the channel.
Yeah,
thank you for being here.
I think it might be. So.
All right, very cool. All right, what's next?
Okay, Nat reads with a two-parter. I don't have an official Pixar favorites list, but Coco would definitely be high on it. It's the first Pixar movie to actually make me cry. Up was mine, but which Pixar movies would be on your list?
I mean, that's always a conversation about that's just how good Pixar has been, that you can have full dialogue conversations about what are the best Pixar films. I mean, Coco and Up are the two that really surprised me the most, because I'll be honest with you, I didn't think Coco or Up looked very good before I saw them. And then I saw them and it's like, they're unbelievable. Coco's very emotional. Up, I mean, at that movie, I don't know a lot of people that didn't cry in the first 5 minutes of Up. I mean, that whole sequence of them meeting, falling in love, growing old, and one of them passing away. I mean, it's like, I'm getting emotional just even thinking about it a little bit. Then you got to look at films, obviously the Toy Story films, any of the first three. And then you got to look at the first Incredibles, which I still contend is one of the best films they've ever done. Ratatouille, I think, is tragically underrated when the conversation of the best Pixar films comes up. And Turning Red is a top 5 one for me. So I don't know where I'd actually, and then we haven't even mentioned films like WALL-E and others. It's tough, but I might have to say Up. I might have to say, what about you, Sean? You got a couple that sit right near the top for you?
Yeah, fascinating. Like for me, Coco, I have it like number 15 on my Pixar ranking. So people get mad at me. I'm like, whoa, guys, it's like an A- movie. Like it's fantastic. There's just that many good ones. For me, I always go to Finding Nemo. I didn't see it when it came out. I didn't see it until 10 years after it came out. And I was a father and I watched it with, my newborn baby son. And it's a movie about parenting. And so when you watch it in that context, holding your newborn baby, it hit on such a deep level of that constant journey of learning to let go, but that protectiveness of your child, them coming back together at the end, that to me was just so special. But also, I'll repeat back the one you said in there of Ratatouille, of like, what are those kind of the under the radar ones? My kids watch that one all the time. And
love that movie.
Took this insane concept about a rat who's coached by a ghost remote controlling a man by pulling his hair. It's the craziest concept you'll ever hear. And they told this deeply emotionally resonant story.
Speaking of, what other one we didn't even mention, and they got a sequel coming up here, is Inside Out. That's another one that really, like, who didn't have, the tearing up in the eyes with the line, she needs to feel sad. It's like, oh, it's just, this studio is just insane. All right, anyway, we got to keep going. What's next?
Sam Fisher says, I have to rewatch Stardust because it's one of my favorites, but the last time I watched it, I didn't enjoy it. Sometimes
Okay.
you can get burnt out on something.
I guess you can. I mean, I don't think it's one of the best movies ever made. I just really think it's the most underrated movie I've ever seen. I mean, it was the new Princess Bride to me. Like when I watched it, I was enamored with it. Whether it was, the presence of Peter O'Toole. And by the way, you got Daredevil and Superman in that movie. Ricky Gervais is a guy. Robert De Niro is so good. Yeah, I adore that movie. I adore it so much. And so many people still tell me they haven't watched it. I highly recommend checking out Stardust.
I haven't watched it, and I've meant to, and I've heard you recommend it, and I haven't watched it. So I'm one of those people.
It's, again, once you watch it, Sean, you'll see what I mean when I say it's kind of like the new, I'm not saying it's as good as Princess Bride, but it's kind of the new Princess Bride. Like, check it out and then let me know what you think about it. All right, what's next?
Okay, Seconds from Disaster says, I think there would be far too much backlash if there's a Star Wars reboot. Probably not the best idea.
Here's the thing. Competent, good, visionary, forward-thinking leaders don't care about backlash. There's a term used in commerce called burn rate. And we're like, today we talk about burn rate and streaming. We think about, watching streaming and then canceling your streaming or whatever. But there's a concept in retail even called burn rate, where to move your company forward sometimes means you have to make changes that will really piss off a certain segment of your existing consumer base. But the theory of burn rate goes, you've got to be willing to burn off 20% to gain 40%. You have to. I could give an example, but I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. So let me make up an example here. Let's say you're a wing place. You make chicken wings. And there's one that's a salt and pepper wing, and you put a lot of salt and pepper on it. And there's like a 10% of your customers just love it, and they're the most vocal. Like, I always go to Jimmy's Wing Place because of their salt and pepper wings. That's why I go. But when you sit down and look at the books, you realize that those salt and pepper wings attribute for 10% of your income, but they cost you 25% of your expenses. Well, a forward-thinking visionary, what a lot of people will be is that they'll be afraid to get rid of the salt and pepper because, these passionate core consumers we have will get angry. Well, you might have to be willing to burn that. And I think whenever you make a change, I remember, Sean, when the iMac got introduced. Remember the Blueberry iMac?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I remember the biggest uproar because it did not have a floppy disk. There was no slot for the floppy disk. Yeah. And so many people were, what the hell are you doing not putting a floppy disk? And Apple was just like, look, we're looking to the future. We understand some of you are going to find this inconvenient. Some people are going to, but we're looking to the future. We got to move ahead. And they were right. And I think they were the first ones, too, to start making their PCs without a disk drive in it, without a CD drive.
That was me.
Or anything, too.
I remember when I got my first MacBook with no CD drive. I was like, what are they doing? What am I going to do? And I immediately moved on. And it was better.
Yep. I mean, and you just got to be. Now, again, I don't think they should reboot Star Wars. But if they come to the conclusion that it is what is best for their property moving forward, look, part of the reality in media, even online, and Sean can tell you this too, just from being online, you ever change anything, you're going to get a loud vocal chorus of complaints. But you just got to be able to see ahead and see if that's still the right direction you're going. So there's that. All right. What's next?
All right. Well, from not Robert Meyer Burnett, who says, guys, I love modern Star Trek. That's how I know you're not him. But A. Marcellus writes, rebooting is not the answer. Instead, Lucasfilm should challenge themselves and go to the far future. Do a new Jedi Order with new enemies, new stories, new ships, new protagonists, planets, etc.
Here's the beautiful thing about the Star Wars universe, and I don't disagree with you, but one of the beautiful things about the Star Wars universe is you don't even have to go into the far future. The Star Wars galaxy is so big, you can go up, little bit into the future if you want. Go 5 years, 10 years, or go 100 years, 200, whatever. But I tend to agree with you. I think you take advantage of the true genius of George Lucas in creating the Star Wars universe, that it's a universe, and take advantage of that and move forward. But you know what, Sean? Here's the real thing, though. At the end of the day, whether they go a little bit into the future, way into the future, back into the Clone Wars era, whatever, none of it matters unless you make great movies. Like they can go way into the future. If they make a crap movie, it's all subjective, but to me, Rise of Skywalker was crap. But if you make another movie like Rise of Skywalker, it doesn't matter where in the timeline you put it, it's still bad. Or you make good movies. So Andor is not a time period I would have made a show.
Right.
But it was remarkable to me, and I loved it. So
Agreed.
the key is still just going to be making good stuff. Do you have if they were to announce it, like, hey, look, we're going to start making a new set of movies and we're going to put it in this time period. What time period would you want that to be in? Way in the past, a little in the past, somewhere in the existing canon, future, far future? Where would you go?
I mean, I would just grab a hold of what we talked about earlier. I think there's the potential with that James Mangold biblical epic because it's a starting point. And so if you're looking to tell the heart of what made original Star Wars so special, it was that this Joseph Campbell hero's journey and all of these timeless mythological tropes told in this great new package. And you can only tell that story so many times if you're in this narrow window of time. And so you keep losing some of what made Star Wars so big and so special. So go 25,000 years in the past, telling a biblical epic, telling the start of the Jedi, it's all right there to be able to have another epic, this big story of someone discovering their potential, bringing down empires and saving the day in a new and fresh way. It's possible. I don't trust Disney Star Wars. I don't trust Kathleen Kennedy to pull it off, but I do like James Mangold a lot of the time.
All right. What's next?
All right. Aiden Foley says, Sean has a very addicting laugh. Love the show. So there you go. Compliment for Sean's laugh.
I'll take
Patent
it.
that thing, man. Patent that. Turn it into a ringtone. Sell it.
Guzman writes, start with episode 1 and make everyone a gun. Yeah, there you go.
Gungan. Oh, God. Oh, God.
We need a new perspective.
I see what you were saying, Sean, about the reasons for going back and starting with episode 1. But I think for 25 years, it's changed. But for 25 years, Star Wars was and became a cultural, I'm not even going to say an icon. It became an embedded part of our culture when Star Wars was about Luke, Han, and Leia. And Chewie, who should have got a medal. But I mean, that's why when I think about I was saying earlier, if you're going to start with what Star Wars was. Star Wars is Luke, Han, and Leia. And that's where you start and then build from there. But I could see the arguments you were making too. You made some really good points about maybe going back to the beginning with part 1. All right. What's next?
All right. Our last super chat. Talkie75 writes, Reign of Marvel mentions that Brie Larson has become disillusioned with the studio because of the constant online hate campaign against her. If Marvel's flops, do you see her leaving the MCU?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Look, if you go back prior to, because Brie Larson, this all started when Brie Larson had the audacity to suggest that maybe press junkets should be opened up to a more diverse group of reporters. The audacity that she had. Some people misinterpreted what she said, and it didn't matter that she came out and clarified what she meant. Didn't matter, right? So now if you were somebody who before that happened said, you know what, I've just never liked Brie Larson as an actress, I have no problem with that. That's perfectly fine. But I mean, the backlash she got and how people try to rewrite history and all of a sudden she's not an Academy Award great actress because she said that maybe they should let some diversity into the reporter's room. And by the way, I agreed with her as somebody who was in those reporter rooms for a long, long time. So I'm quite uniquely positioned to have an opinion about that. That being said, yeah, I could see her just being over it. It's like, it doesn't matter how, like, even when she puts out a movie that makes $1 billion at the box office, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are going to be people in this fandom, but listen, and Sean, I've talked about this a lot on my channel. There's a reason why epic level filmmakers and directors, for example, like Christopher McQuarrie, has come out and said, I'm never going to make a movie in that genre because I've seen their fan base, and I don't want anything to do with that. And we've heard other directors coming out and say that too. Somebody like Brie Larson has had to live in that for a long time, where people are writing off or just trying to destroy her movie simply because she's in it, because once she thought more diverse reporters should be allowed in something. I mean, I certainly don't see her sticking around for long. I don't know why she would want to. Like, she's getting offered anything she wants right now to appear in a lot of different stuff. Like, the offers on her table are not few and far between. So I don't know if I can see her sticking around for long. I don't know, Sean, what would you say that? Do you think if the Marvels, which I don't think they're doing a great job marketing this movie, to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to do great at the box office, but let's say that's true and it doesn't do all that great. Could you see her leaving the MCU sometime soon?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she's really excited for it. And so that means a lot to me. But outside of that, it doesn't seem like the trailers are generating buzz. It feels kind of like the Ahsoka problem of this movie is the sequel to 3 different things. It's a spinoff, and you know, Miss Marvel wasn't this widely watched show, and then Captain Marvel made $1 billion, but it wasn't generally regarded as one of the stronger MCU films. And so there's a bunch of things working against it, and the internet has picked her as a target. That sucks. I mean, I think that some of these quotes from her were very poorly phrased, and therefore they lend themselves to the internet running with them. But I don't want to be judged by the clumsiest sentence I've said or a thought that is not particularly well crafted. And it doesn't take away everything else that I've ever done if I do say something stupid. But the internet has picked her as a target. So she's frustrated by all of that. Likewise, she had a movie that she started that made $1 billion, and they made a sequel that's not Captain Marvel 2. It's The Marvels. And if you're her and you've got an Oscar and you've got $1 billion film and you were an Endgame, and they're like, all right, now you're this other thing. I think that would be very frustrating. Like, why am I doing this? My movie made $1 billion. Everyone is coming at me on the internet, choosing me as the target, and it's not even Captain Marvel 2. And it took forever for this thing to even come out. Yeah. So the momentum is gone. Like, the excitement's just not there like it would have been had this come out 2 years ago. I don't know what, besides contracts and a dump truck of money, I don't know why she would want to come back at this moment, unless this thing really is well received and wins people over, which the internet seems to have made up its mind.
All right, what's next?
All right, moving on to our member chats. Sam Fisher writes, can't wait to watch Ferrari as a double feature with Ford v Ferrari.
I didn't catch that. What was that?
Watching Ferrari as a double feature with Ford v Ferrari.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't say that would be a great double feature because I haven't seen Ferrari yet. The trailer looked good, but Ford v Ferrari. I mean, I still remember when I walked out of that movie for the first time. I went to an advanced screening of it, and I was just blown away by it. And by the way, not Ford v Ferrari good, but that little Gran Turismo movie that came out that looked like it was going to be laughably bad. I thought it looked laughably bad and wouldn't do. Not a bad little film, by the way. For those of you, did you see it, Sean?
Yeah, I've seen both of those movies, and both of them far exceeded my expectations. But yeah, I loved Ford v Ferrari. I loved it. Rewatched it back in June. I was like, this thing is just as good as I remembered, and I've already seen it 3-4 times. And then Gran Turismo, like, yeah, I watched it. I never played the game. I was like, I don't know what video game kid. What is this? It worked. Like, it feels like it should have come out 20 years ago. It's the type of movie that they used to make. And it's just like a solid crowd pleaser in a way that was like, this thing just kind of works.
All right. What's next?
Okay, we got TJ writes, Gen V renewed for season 2.
Yes.
The boys' universe is so rich and has so much to offer. If they made a show about a janitor in a soup's apartment complex, I'd watch it.
I'll tell you what, I cannot believe how much I love Gen V. I was worried about it that, okay, here comes a spin-off show and blah, 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 blah. But I have really fallen in love with this show. And that's why I get excited for Thursdays. Thursdays are game day. Because I get new episodes of Gen V, I get new episodes of Loki, because I've been liking Loki so far, season 2, I've been liking. And Gen V is fantastic. I'm very excited to hear it got greenlit for a second season. All right, what's next?
Disgraceful Entertainment writes, man, my heart hurts. Rest in peace, Burt Young.
Yeah, did you hear about this, Sean? Paulie, Burt Young, actor, passed away. I believe he was 83. I didn't see what the causes were or anything like that. But I mean, when I think of Rocky, obviously the first thing we think about is Sylvester Stallone. But honestly, when I think Rocky, the next thing I think of is Paulie. But I'm going to admit something that I feel bad about. When I read that he had passed away, my first thought was, I thought he had passed away.
I did too.
I thought he had passed away a few years ago.
I thought I had read that he had passed away. So when Stallone put up a post saying we still miss you or something, I'm like, is it the anniversary of when he passed away? Then only to find out, because IMDb didn't show a death date, and then I saw a story. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah. So I was kind of surprised to see that. All right, what's next?
Okay. We've got Dario, who writes, hello again from Netherlands. I have a question about the Crystal Lake TV show. Any news if it's still happening about Family Voorhees? Thanks, and have a good week.
I don't even know if it's still happening at all. I mean, for all I know, it's already been shot, but I don't even know it's still happening. Do you know anything about it, Sean? Because off the top of my head, I really don't.
No, there haven't really been any recent updates on it. It was just kind of the announcement. And so all of us are kind of scratching our heads at like, what is this TV show? Why is A24 associated with this? But then I haven't seen any updates on filming, casting, anything like that. So a lot of us are just sitting here waiting for more information.
All right, what's next?
All right. Well, Matt says, it was awesome having Sean on the show yesterday. Well, if you like that, you'd like him even more on today. Him and his buddy Cody Leach, that was in the chat, are my go-to for horror.
Oh, for horror.
And we were just talking about some horror.
And we were just talking about some horror. No, it is really great for us to have Sean here, and I'm so glad he was available again today. All right, what's next?
Okay. B-Town writes, what's up, OG Campea? What would be your advice for someone that wants to be a movie critic? Is it as simple as keeping up with what's coming out and leaving reviews? Thanks, and bring on the filthy.
Well, listen, instead of going into a half-hour diatribe, there are 2 videos I've put up over the last number of years. Just go onto YouTube and search Getting Started John Campea. Just do that, and you should come across like a 2-hour video that I did on getting started in blogging, podcasting, YouTubing, whatever. It's an older video now, like 5 or 6 years old, but everything in it is still, the principles are still all the same. So I'd say go and look that up. That would be the most helpful thing. All right.
And I'll say this. This is a true statement. I started in 2016. I was unemployed delivering paint. I watched that video.
Really?
And that was one of my starts to getting into, like, I was always like, I put up my first Jackie Chan fan webpage back in the 90s. I've been experimenting, and I was at a low point in life, and I was like, maybe I could do this YouTube thing. I watched that video you just recommended. That video, I think would be like, I don't want to overstate this, just throw superlatives. That video in a sense changed my life, and your inspiration as a creator. You were one of the people that started me. So I firmly mean this when I say it. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for posting that video. And those of you wondering, watch that video. Listen, learn, actually apply it. And that idea you say in there of like, you have to be good, that is so true.
Oh, thank you, man. And again, yes, the best thing I can say now, instead of me trying to go into too much, is go find that video. And it'll probably, in the recommend, I did a bit of an update to it a couple of years ago. You might find that as well, but hopefully that'll be helpful to you. So thanks. All right. What's next?
Alan writes, hi, Campea crew. If the Marvels doesn't do well in the box office, could it affect Miss Marvel not getting a season 2? That would be sad. Thanks.
I honestly don't know if they have plans to do a Ms. Marvel season 2 as it is.
It may have just been a setup for this.
Yeah, the Ms. Marvel series may have just been in their misguided strategy to just introduce us to Ms. Marvel and then transition her into the main MCU and just have her be a movie character. I honestly don't know. I do know this. there are two things that I see and acknowledge about Ms. Marvel. Number one, I think it's the second best show Disney has made, or I should say the MCU has made on Disney Plus, behind WandaVision. I absolutely love that show. Had more heart, character. It was just a beautiful show to me. Second thing I know is not a ton of people watched it. I mean, people who watched it loved it, but not a ton of people watched it. I mean, Ms. Marvel is a relatively new character, even in comic books. So there's that. But yeah, a lot of questions about what happens if the Marvels doesn't do well. If the Marvels doesn't do well, I have a very, very hard time seeing them doing a season 2, but not that they were ever going to do a season 2 anyway. So I don't know. We'll find out. All right, what's next?
Callum writes, hey, crew, are you going to play the Spider-Man 2 game tomorrow? Game of the year incoming.
I don't care how good it is. I have a very hard time believing it's going to be anywhere near as good as Baldur's Gate 3. They're two very, very different style of games, for sure. But I'm probably not going to play anything else until I get through Baldur's Gate 3, which I still have not gotten through Baldur's Gate 3. But at some point I will pick it up. Sean, are you playing anything these days right now?
Well, so I have a middle schooler. So Fortnite, we're a Fortnite family is what we are. I played way too many Fortnite. I have way more skins than I should admit to. And I'm waiting for the Michael Myers skin to be available next week.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And my son is obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's, so he keeps trying to suck me into that world and all day except like, you got to play this, you got to play. Dude, I don't have time. I have to watch movies. But we also have played through all the Spider-Man games together. So this is one where my son has been watching the count, and he loves Venom. And so the idea that they're bringing Venom into it, and he's the generation that was raised where both Peter Parker and Miles are like equally Spider-Man. So having both of them plus Venom, like he's like mapping out, or when we play, you'll play as Peter Parker and I'll play as Miles, and we'll split it when it's Venom. And so we're like already scheduling our weekend to try and binge through this thing.
All right, we've gone long today, so let's just take one more here. What's next?
CJ Rebirth writes, rewatched Shang-Chi yesterday, just an awesome movie. So you became an actor because you thought the monkeys were riding horses. I did, when in fact they were acting as if they knew how to ride them. Still can't wrap my head around that one.
I'll tell you what, I remember when I first saw Shang-Chi, I was literally buzzing. Like I did an out of the theater reaction coming out of the premiere. And you could almost see me shaking. Like I remember Greg Alba was from Real Rejects. He was sitting like 3 or 4 seats down from me. He'd come in, talk to me before the movie started. And as soon as the movie was done, I remember I walked over to Greg's seat and I said, it's not just me, right? That was fucking awesome, right? And I just remember I passionately love that movie. I think it might be a top 5 MCU film. Maybe not quite in the top 5. I'd have to sit down and actually chart it out, but it's right up there. I think when you look at all the principles and building blocks of filmmaking, I think they just did so many things well in that movie. And look, my overall favorite action sequence, Sean, I don't know if you've heard me say this. My overall favorite action sequence in the MCU is the airport fight in Civil War. Mm-hmm. But my single favorite fight in the MCU is that bus scene in Shang-Chi. Whenever, like Ann and I just made a home theater, and whenever I have somebody new come over, somebody who hasn't been to the house in a while come over, the first thing I do is I take them into that theater room and I put on that bus scene. And I say, look at this. I love it. What did you think about Shang-Chi?
I'm not quite as positive on it as you are.
Most people aren't.
I mean, I think it's really, really good. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of my origins of getting into movies and even talking movies on the internet were Hong Kong martial arts films back in the 90s. And that's what they bring into this. And you see these different styles and traditions, and you get a lot of Jackie Chan on that bus sequence. And so just for me, it was like, yes, we're finally getting this. Some of the MCU-isms, a little bit of the humor and some stuff in the third act didn't quite entirely work for me. But I mean, I think does so many awesome things. And it's an example of how they continue to make a movie that fits in the MCU, but brings in new genres, new flavors, and new characters.
And guys, that'll do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show podcast. Thank you so much for being here and making this show part of your day. Big special thank you to all of you guys who sent in super chats, or our channel members who sent in questions. Number one, because you gave us great fun things to talk about. But number two, you supported our channel as you did it, and all of us involved with the show. Thank you guys so very much for your support. Don't forget, a little bit later this afternoon, we have an open mic, so come on back and join us for that. I want to thank Jonathan Voico for running the show today.
Hey guys, see you later.
All of our thoughts, of course, with Ray Ora, if he's still actually in a jury. What if he's actually the target of the new Jury Duty show, season 2? What if Ray is actually that
I can
guy?
only hope.
That would be the greatest television show of all time. And of course, Sean Chandler's been here. Sean, where can people find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Just look up Sean Chandler, and you'll either find an NFL player or a guy that looks like me that's talking about movies. And on Twitter, it is Kirk Never Died. I didn't use my name because I'm a fool, so it's Kirk Never Died.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. My name's John Campea, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.